I had a little bit of imposter syndrome early on when you're talking to a lot of candidates who may have been 5 to 20 years older than me. And I'm trying to give them, obviously technology risk is a huge component now. So I think, technology, especially in the 20 plus years that I've been doing this, has been kind of pervasive for a lot of the roles. We'll try and go through that exercise with them, make sure that, again, there's that alignment between what they're looking for and what a potential candidate would be looking for. Career advice.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we explore the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Today, I am joined by John Chaintreuil, associate partner at Hanover, who brings over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, helping companies achieve remarkable results through exceptional people. And one of those exceptional people is John. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jules.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So I always like to get started talking about where you came from. So how did you get into executive search? You've been doing it for over 2 decades. What originally drew you to the space?
It was a little bit by accident. I actually grew up on the East Coast. After college, moved out to the West Coast and was actually a candidate of a boutique contingent executive search firm focused on accounting and finance. And I was actually a candidate of theirs for a hedge fund position that I was grossly underqualified for in retrospect, but really hit it off with the two owners. I think they were both mentors for me early in my career. They were kind of just coming out of the dot-com, bust, if you will, and looking to, expand their business. I think, their first joint hire. One of them was really a tactician, really focused on kind of the X's and O's of recruiting. The other one, very passionate, two very different styles, but they kind of said, "Hey, we have an opportunity for you to come in to our firm." And I kind of jumped at the opportunity. It was something new and exciting. I had actually studied a lot of HR and workplace issues in college. Even though I wasn't setting out to do that, it was really kind of a logical place to be. And, I think one of the unique things was I was right out of school. So I think I had a little bit of imposter syndrome early on when you're talking to a lot of candidates who may have been 5 to 20 years older than me. And I'm trying to give them career advice. I think, again, I learned from two great people and, I think the firm itself produced really high quality work. We had great clients, really focused on the Los Angeles market. And, I think, again, it was a great training ground for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's a lot of job hopping that typically happens in people's careers. But after 2 decades of working in the space, what keeps you motivated now?
It's funny. Yeah. I mean, my wife had changed jobs a couple times, but I had gone through, a career of helping people make the transition and hadn't really had that experience until a few years ago when I myself kind of made a change to join Hanover. It's kind of eye-opening. I've just been really steady in the space, I guess. I've always, worked for great people. I think that's, one of the things that, has really attracted me to the industry has been, working with, I think different people. I think I've just been lucky, I guess, in some respects to work around quality individuals. The other thing is, every day, most of my job is actually not interfacing with my coworkers, but with candidates. And, you're constantly getting different searches, new individuals. For me, I kind of have an intellectual itch to, learn new industries, learn new job functions. So, I've constantly been learning and been challenged. So I think that's been, one of the other things that I think has probably kept me in the seat all these years.
Yeah. Yeah. And Hanover has had some massive growth as well. They've grown into a global talent solutions firm. So, in that regard, how do you balance the art and science of matching the right leaders to the right opportunities?
Well, I mean, I think it all starts with a methodology. I mean, I think we at Hanover, just a little history on the firm. I mean, it's now 30 years old. I've been very involved over the last, 4 years of that. And really I've been focused on the US expansion that's happened. I think the business started in London. I think, number of the individuals who had success there were kind of looking to branch out. And I think US was a key market for them, came in. And I think It's actually interesting. One of my colleagues who was the first employee of Hanover back in London had moved to the US and had started up his own search business. And basically, it became a rejoining of Hanover for him. But that kind of created a little bit of a foothold here in the US for the organization. I think the organization has been really innovative, very adaptable to different trends. I think that's been one of the keys to success. I think growing at the right pace. I mean, we've have had just some unbelievable years. I would say going back just a couple of years ago, we lost a client that at one point made up probably more than 50% of our our billings for the year in the U.S. First Republic Bank that had unfortunately got caught up in the banking crisis a few years ago.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think what was so solid about the firm, meaning Hanover, was that we were able to rebound from that. I think in past years may have been, a death nail for a lot of organizations, but for us, we had, really spread out our clientele. And, in this business, it's really about relationships. A
Hmm.
lot of the
Hmm.
relationships, even though their business card no longer said First Republic Bank, they spread out to other areas. In some cases, we had actually placed them into those organizations, and that methodology that they and an approach that we conducted with them at First Republic was remembered. And lo and behold, now we have a number of new logos in our organization's portfolio. So it's you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to adjust to the market, adjust to different client factors that are going to come into play, and from that you can kind of shift your business. But you have to have that core methodology, that core approach to how you conduct business, and those long-term relationships will remain.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you have been in this industry, what are some of the shifts that you've noticed in executive hiring? Some of these trends that have been taking place over the past few years, especially in the sectors like finance, technology, and risk.
Well, certainly I think technology, you can think about it as a functional area, but technology is really, at the intersection of everything nowadays. I think
It's true.
every organization, yeah, technology, has really permeated all facets. So, whether it's an accounting position, a lot of it is now using AI tools and new closing softwares and new ERP systems. If you're talking about risk, obviously technology risk is a huge component now. So I think, technology, especially in the 20 plus years that I've been doing this, has been kind of pervasive for a lot of the roles. But as it relates to recruiting, I think, certainly there's been a shift in terms of remote work. I think that's opened up a vastly different sort of talent market for a number of our clients where, maybe they were previously confined by a small, uh, talent pool. They can now open that up, and with technology, open themselves up to vastly different sort of individuals with tremendous talent that they can really tap into. I think that's been certainly big over the last few years. I think the other thing that I think has always kind of lurked in the background for executive search in particular has been, this feeling like, hey, through technology, we can, maybe pass up search firms. When I first joined the industry, monster.com and hot jobs, those are some of the hot names. And then, it became LinkedIn. And now, there's a lot of AI, or promise of AI. But I think at the end of the day, it's really that that careful approach. I mean, certainly utilizing technology and utilizing some of the new tools that are out there. But I've worried about the industry for a number of times, but at the end of the day, it goes on, and I think a lot of that has to do with that relationship aspect that I spoke about earlier. You know, I think for a lot of companies, it's not just about finding the right resume or finding a resume. It's about finding the right person, finding the person that's going to be the right fit for them at that particular time, and really aligning both candidate goals and expectations with client goals and aspirations for that person. That's still something that hasn't been done. I think it's particularly for executive search in a way that's been able to pass up the executive search industry.
Yeah. And I think that depth, that breadth of experience that you have really helps you to advise clients in the right way. So when you are advising these clients, you're working on critical C-suite or leadership hires. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you're still seeing companies make?
I think, well, from a attracting talent perspective, I think,
Mhm.
today more than ever, really, even though, again, there is that sort of, still systematic sort of process that happens in executive search. The candidate experience is really important. There's a speed that, needs to happen, or a communication that needs to happen. I think a lot of clients, there's a sense that, time can, kind of work to their advantage. We can continue to review. Sometimes a lot of clients, this is one of the, I think, common complaints I hear with candidates is it seems like a lot of clients kind of dip their toes into the waters, try and feel out, hey, is this, we kind of have an idea of a search. We think we're, on the right page. And certainly that exists, always, you're trying to modify what your ideal is for that candidate. But oftentimes, that experience for candidates, they kind of feel like, does this company actually know what they're looking for? Are they urgent about this position? So I think that speed is really important. And I think a lot of clients kind of miss that. I think the other component is really, and this is something where I'm very frank with my clients, and really try and understand them. And we as Hanover, we're really strong, I think, at working with great companies, but also companies where, again, there might be some other challenging situations. I think that's why you bring in an executive search firm, is there's some challenge, there's some pain that you're experiencing with your recruitment process. Really like to understand, like, is this a company that is going to support growth? Is this a company that is going to be able to, kind of, if everyone wants that superstar talent to come in, can you actually retain that talent? And honestly, I
Yeah.
have to, tell some of my clients, like, you guys are a B shop, and sometimes this is a tougher sort of conversation to have, but you might be better served bringing in this person that has the experience, but is going to be sticking around longer than that person that is a new shiny object. But guess what? They're going to be a shiny object for a lot of your competitors as well in a few years. And, they might not be sticking around. So, that,
Yeah.
doing this so long, you kind of see some of the, pitfalls, I guess, like, you place someone somewhere and 18 months later, they're no longer there. That there's usually, a story to that. And sometimes, again, it's a bit of a misalignment with, where the candidate was looking to go and where the client was looking to go with that position. So I think having those frank conversations is really important, and doing some introspection. So I think those are kind of the two things, like kind of that speed, that candidate experience in particular, and then that ability to really kind of understand, like, what are our goals as an organization, what are the candidates goals, and trying to, make sure that those two are aligned.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. It's absolutely necessary. So on the flip side of that, what are some success stories, or even just one success story that you've seen where you place the right candidate in the right position, and it just shows the impact that the right leader can have on an organization?
Yeah, there's probably too many to count. Recently I took a lot of satisfaction in a search that I worked on with a company in suburban Maryland, and I think that was, right away kind of a challenge for them. They were looking for a IT leader. They had a bad hire before, someone who, had only lasted about a year. They had tried, I think a person had come through some internal referral or something along those lines.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the organization, I think, in that time had really fallen behind. Was previously a pretty sleepy organization. Through a kind of digital transformation project, all of a sudden their revenues have doubled, a couple times over the last, 3-4 years. And, you had a situation where you had a lot of legacy employees that were still operating like that sleepy organization it was, previously. And, it was now, again, a high growth, high success sort of organization. This leader who was in place had really, kind of shown himself to be a little bit more of a yes man than someone who was going to be raising the bar for their employees. So we were brought in, really needed to help them assess what they needed. And I think that was, kind of the process, was really trying to go back and forth with them before the search, try and understand, okay, what are your pain points? What are the things you absolutely must have? What are the things that are nice to have that reprioritization. And it was actually surprising to them. I think they had actually thought like we need this person in house, but I think by expanding their geographic reach, they were actually able to bring in someone who, to date, has done tremendous things, has really again raised the bar for their organization, and his employees. I think he leads a team of about 70 or 80 people. And, I think it's been kind of that mentorship, attracting and retaining talent underneath him as well, that's allowed the organization to really continue their growth plans. At that point before this hire had kind of stalled just because of some of the issues they were facing. So those are the things that are, it's an exciting search for me, because again, you can see it's a company like right on the verge, right on the precipice of success, but there's that one person or maybe a couple people that are holding them back. And once they get that in place, all of a sudden, again, it's like, wind at their back and away they go. So those are the most satisfying searches as always. Again, that one happened to be a replacement search for someone who was in that role before, but other times it's that organization where again it's a newly created position, and again with that person in place, it can really make the whole machine work. Those are also very satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you bring up a great point, in that a lot of times the organization, they know that they need leadership, but they don't know specifically what type of leadership they need or specifically what they need this person to do. And I think that's where the consultative approach, where you come in and you're able to really lead and guide them to the right candidate versus saying, oh, this is what you need. Well, this is what you get. But saying, oh, this is what you think you need. Well, is it that or could it be this? I think that that's where your expertise and experience could really help companies out.
Yeah, I think it's something, being a retained search firm, you hope that you're being consultative. I don't want to be just a waiter at a restaurant, like, okay, you want this, you want that. I really try and challenge in some cases, okay, what do you need? Sometimes offer, especially with some, of our research that we'll do, we try and offer, kind of some different paths. And, in some cases you may go down a couple paths and have to, back up and try a different avenue. But I think it's helpful exercise for our clients to really understand. And these are pivotal searches in many cases. We tend to work on C-level positions, or if not C-level, some sort of kind of very transformative sort of role. And that's really exciting. And I think our clients have obviously entrusted us to find them that talent. It's on us to make sure that we're getting them the right person for that. And in many cases, our clients know exactly, what they need, what they want, and
Mhm.
we get that conviction and we can understand that. Other times where there's some challenges that we can, kind of anticipate, we'll try and go through that exercise with them, make sure that again, there's that alignment between what they're looking for and what a potential candidate would be looking for. And but again, it's different searches are going to have different needs and requirements. There are some where it's going to be very consultative, and I think that's really rewarding. Others where again, clients just know what they want, know what they need, and
Yeah. Yeah. So, it sounds like, you guys have a great methodology of how you're able to work with clients. You clearly have a great track record of working with the clients that you do work with. So I'm wondering, what are some of the growth challenges that you're dealing with, in the company? How do you see Hanover growing over the next year or two?
yeah, I think for us, it really comes down to for ourselves, like recruiting the right people. This is a relationship business. I think for us, we have a very collaborative, agile, innovative sort of process that I think doesn't always mesh with other executive search firms. So, we'll have some people who come and just some of the things that they, you know, habits or, work streams that they've worked under in the past maybe just don't work the same way here. I think we really try and foster with all of our employees, even down to kind of our researchers and low associates, that ability to interface with clients. We want them to be on those calls and be part of the process, because a lot of times they might be boots to the ground under the challenges of the search might be. And we, by having them in those conversations, I think it's really helpful. We don't try and hide them behind some kind of wall, for instance. So I think for us, getting that full desk sort of recruiter, I think has been one challenge. I think the other aspect is, for us, we're always competing with the Shrek firms, your big, you know, big executive search firms. We have made some strategic, acquisitions, partnerships to continue our growth geographically. I think we now, have a Asia Pacific component as well, which we're very excited about. We've also entered into some new industries spaces. I think we recently brought in a healthcare focused individual who, looks to be just an awesome hire for us. I think for us, trying to find the right balance, we're not looking to be, have explosive growth. We're looking to have the growth that's going to be sustainable. And, for us, it's all about making sure we can satisfy the needs of our existing clients. I think for us, again, to, kind of go back to your original question, I think trying to, compete with Shreks, I think that's one challenge as always. I think we provide a much better specific process and one that's more adaptable for a lot of clients. But certainly, I think a lot of large companies like just the name recognition of some of those larger firms. And then number two, I think for us, just acquiring the right talent for our own internal team. That's always a challenge. We can certainly relate with our clients in that regard.
Yeah, of course. Something that every company is looking for. So how can people best connect with you? How can they best connect with Hanover? For all of our viewers and listeners, how can they take action?
Yeah, feel free to find me. I think our website has my profile, www.hanoversearch.com. I think there's a LinkedIn button on there. Please feel free to reach out. Always happy to, add someone to my network, and always happy to, have a conversation if someone's either a job seeker or looking to attract talent to their organization. I think that's probably the best way, and saves people having to spell out my name as well.
Fair enough. And actually, all of those hyperlinks are going to be right below this conversation. No matter whether you're watching in YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, you can find those links right in the show notes. John, thank you so much for your time and expertise. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jules. It was a pleasure.